Okay, so we all know celebrity trials can give us a glimpse into, well, a different world. Maybe some drama, some he said, she said stuff.
Right, the usual headlines.
Exactly. But what we're about to delve into with you today goes so much further than that. We're talking about testimony from the Sean Diddy Combs trial, specifically day 5, Cassie Ventura on the stand.
And it's deeply unsettling stuff. It feels miles away from typical celebrity news, almost like, something from a thriller novel.
It really does. So we're doing a deep dive into that specific day. We're drawing from the reporting by Inner City Press and also some analysis shared on the What is Miss Star Worth YouTube channel.
And it's really important we echo the warning that came with that original video. The content here, it deals with extremely sensitive and potentially disturbing allegations. Viewer discretion is definitely advised.
Absolutely. This isn't your standard relationship drama. The accusations point towards something, well, much darker, much more serious.
Yeah, far more troubling.
So try and picture being in that courtroom on day 5. You can just imagine the atmosphere, right? Really thick with anticipation.
You'd have reporters everywhere, the public gallery packed. Even the jurors, they must have sensed something major was coming.
Totally. And then Cassie Ventura takes the stand again. Reports said she looked tired, understandably, but also remarkably calm.
Which in a way makes what she said even heavier, doesn't it? This really disturbing account delivered with such, detached clarity.
It does. And interestingly, the defense, they didn't jump straight into the main allegations.
No, they started with questions about the layout of Biddy's LA mansion, the
Yeah.
security features, that kind of thing.
Right. It almost felt like they were, I don't know, establishing a baseline, painting a picture of the property before going somewhere else.
Exactly, before venturing into much darker territory.
And then came that question, the one that just hung there. You could almost feel it. Miss Ventura, have you ever been beneath the property, inside the tunnel?
Wow. Yeah, you can imagine the silence after that. There was an objection, apparently, but the judge allowed it.
And Cassie's answer, just one word, yes.
And with that single word, something shifted. It confirmed these rumors, these whispers that had been around for ages. Suddenly, it's sworn testimony.
Such a powerful moment. And the defense, they immediately followed up, right?
They did. And what did you see when you went down there? And this is where her account just takes this incredibly disturbing, very specific turn.
She testified she really didn't want to go down there at all.
But he insisted, said he, quote, had something to show me. And she mentioned he was high at the time.
And the entrance itself? Not inside the house?
No, outside. Hidden, near the pool, she said, disguised by plants, foliage, a hatch under the leaves.
So completely separate, intentionally hidden. What does that kind of concealment suggest?
Well, it screams secrecy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And control over who even knows it exists, let alone who gets access. This wasn't just another room, it was set apart.
And going down, she described concrete stairs, steel doors.
And a noticeable drop in temperature. Straight away, you get this feeling of entering somewhere completely different, isolated from the house above.
And she said, once inside, she knew this wasn't a panic room, not a wine cellar. It was, in her words, something else entirely.
That phrase really sticks with you.
It does. She described this long corridor, bare walls, harsh fluorescent lights, and a constant, mechanical buzzing sound.
Yeah, she said it felt less like a home and more like an institution.
Yeah.
Very sterile, very unwelcoming.
Plus, the layout was confusing. Twisting hallways, no windows, no cell service. It sounds deliberately disorienting.
Absolutely. Designed to cut you off, make you feel isolated. Yeah. That lack of light, lack of connection, it enhances the sense of being trapped, maybe, dependent on whoever brought you there.
And his behavior. Walking ahead, talking to himself, mumbling about proving a point.
It just adds another layer of unease, doesn't it? Like there's this specific, maybe unstable reason he's showing her this place. She said she was scared to argue with him.
Understandable. Then they reach a secured door. Needs a keypad code.
And behind that door, a large room, like a chamber.
The details here are chilling. Red lights, cameras mounted in the corners, leather furniture.
And the smell. She described this weird mix, cleaning chemicals, sweat, and, quote, something else she couldn't place.
She said the feeling was clinical, but also perverse, like bad things had happened there.
That combination of clinical and perverse is really telling. The red lights, the cameras, constant surveillance. The furniture suggests an activity, but the smell hints at something unpleasant being covered up, maybe. It's just wrong.
And then the objects she saw. Shelves with props, masks, ropes, oils, latex outfits. A whole rack of unworn clothes.
Mirrors on the ceiling and floor, too. And soundproof padding on the walls.
It just screams control, doesn't it? She said it felt like it was designed specifically for having power over someone else, not just storage, but purposeful.
The specific items. Yeah. Masks, restraints, the soundproofing, the mirrors. It all points very strongly towards a space built for private, possibly coercive, and almost certainly recorded activities. That feeling of control she mentioned seems baked into the design.
And she wasn't alone down there, was she?
No. She described seeing two women, both wearing wigs and masks. One was lying very still. The other was near a tripod with a camera.
They didn't speak, didn't move much.
Apparently not. And he, Diddy, just referred to them as performers. Dismissively. Cassie wasn't introduced, wasn't acknowledged.
She said she felt sick and made an excuse to leave pretty quickly. Can't blame her.
No, absolutely not. The anonymity of those women hidden behind masks is just deeply disturbing. The term performers and keeping Cassie separate, it reinforces this idea of a secret, controlled world. Her needing to escape immediately tells you how impacted she was.
And what happened after she left the tunnel?
Confrontation. He allegedly told her very directly, "You never saw anything, you don't repeat anything. That place is for me, not for you."
Wow. A direct warning. Asserting secrecy. Ownership.
Exactly. That phrase, "that place is for me," it's incredibly possessive. It speaks volumes about how he viewed that space and maybe the people in it. She said it was the only time she went down there, but she never forgot it.
And there was more. More rooms.
Yes. She testified about 3 other distinct spaces she saw down there.
What were they like?
One was apparently pitch black inside, just a bench and chains fixed to the wall.
Chains. Good grief.
Yeah. Another room had a full-length mirror and some kind of digital panel next to it. She didn't know what it did.
And the third?
Just a single chair and a box of wires nearby. Again, no explanation given.
These details just make it even more bizarre and sinister. What could those rooms possibly be for?
It's hard to say for sure, but the description's chains, a lone chair with wires, a mirror with unknown tech, they push it beyond even like an unconventional BDSM space. It sounds more like confinement or observation or something else entirely, something really quite dark.
And when she said she wanted to leave, get out of there.
He apparently laughed at her, told her she wasn't ready, that it was too real for her.
Like he was testing her. Or maybe enjoying her reaction.
It certainly suggests a power play, a level of desensitization on his part, maybe trying to shock or intimidate her, dictating what she can handle. It speaks volumes about the power dynamic.
But the words that really stuck with her, the ones he supposedly said right before they got to the last door down there.
Chilling. This is where I bring the ones I own.
It's ownership of people. It's incredibly disturbing.
It reframes everything else, doesn't it? That mindset. It casts such a dark shadow over all the other details she described.
And then behind that final door, she heard sounds.
Muffled sounds, yeah. Like voices, but distorted. Almost like music coming from a bad speaker, she said. But she didn't want to know who or what was in there.
Can't imagine wanting to. She left completely shaken.
Absolutely. Said her clothes even smelled of the place afterwards. And she didn't tell anyone. Not family, not friends.
Why not?
Fear. She testified she was afraid she'd just disappear. Like the women she saw down there or whoever was behind that last door, that level of fear is profound.
It really is. It highlights the intense intimidation she must have felt.
Yeah, comparing herself to those hidden figures, it reinforces that sense of a secret, possibly dangerous world she'd glimpsed.
So why testify now, after all this time, facing that fear?
Her answer was incredibly powerful. She said, and I'm quoting loosely here, because it's not just about me anymore.
Right.
Because he's still doing this. She expressed fear for others. Because if someone else ends up down there and never comes back.
Wow. That's a heavy burden to carry, a powerful motivation.
It absolutely is. It shifts her testimony from just recounting her own trauma to being a potential warning, a plea for others' safety.
So after the tunnel testimony, the focus shifted, right? The defense brought up this term freakoffs.
Yes, they did. It was a term that apparently appeared in text messages between them, sometimes sounding almost casual, like code. The defense seemed to be trying to use it to suggest these encounters were, consensual.
A common tactic to try to reframe things.
Exactly. Shift the narrative towards the alleged victim's choices.
Yeah.
But Cassie's explanation painted a very, very different picture of what these freak-offs actually were.
What did she say they involved?
She described them as planned events. Always involving sex, she said, but often with multiple partners, sometimes being filmed. There were assigned roles, specific instructions, and crucially, often mandatory drug use.
And there was evidence? texts.
Yeah, the court saw text messages detailing these planned times, instructions, even props like specific wigs or outfits that were
So
required.
highly orchestrated, not spontaneous.
Definitely not spontaneous.
Yeah.
She testified they happened regularly, at least twice a month. Some might have been more impromptu, but many were arranged almost like business meetings. That level of planning is significant.
And the drug use aspect, she
Mhm.
was clear on consent.
Absolutely clear. She stated very firmly that agreeing while drugged is not consent. She testified she was often high, sometimes didn't even remember what happened during these sessions, as Diddy apparently called them in writing.
Where did these happen?
Various places, luxury hotels, private homes, and also, disturbingly, she confirmed some took place in that tunnel complex beneath the mansion. That brings it back to that controlled, isolated environment. It connects those threads of her testimony.
She mentioned one specific time in the tunnel.
Yeah, being forced to wear a latex suit, remain completely silent, with strangers present. And she was allegedly told she'd be punished if she broke character.
Punishment for breaking character. And then there was that text message.
The one shown in court from Diddy. This time I want control, no safe word.
No safe word. That's incredibly alarming, especially in any kind of BDSM context.
It completely removed the element of control and safety for the participant. Safe words are fundamental for consent and stopping things if they go too far. Removing that is, well, it indicates a total disregard for her autonomy.
How does she say she felt afterwards?
Hollow. Unsure of who she even was anymore. Just deeply damaged by it all.
She also mentioned deleting media, videos, photos.
Yes, but she was clear it wasn't out of shame. It was fear. Fear of what might happen if those things existed, if she didn't comply with deleting them.
And the drugs involved? What did she say they were?
A mix. Opiates, MDMA, benzodiazepines, weed, mostly pills, she said, and often given to her either by Diddy himself or by members of his staff.
Making her feel how?
Foggy, slow, compliant, her words. Easy to manipulate, basically.
She even described blackouts. Waking up somewhere unfamiliar.
Yeah, waking up in strange places, no memory of getting there, and sometimes finding cameras still on, still recording.
The idea of being filmed without consent or while unable to consent, it's deeply violating.
Absolutely, and she started to suspect it was systematic. He apparently used to say things like, "You're mine forever now."
Which she initially took as just words.
Right. But over time, she came to believe he was actually documenting things for control. She even testified she saw a glimpse of a video on his laptop once.
Of her.
Yes, of her, with two men she had no memory of being with. She asked him to delete it.
And his response?
Chillingly direct, according to her testimony, "I keep everything for leverage."
Leverage, that's, wow. An explicit admission of using recordings for control.
That's what she alleged, he said. It suggests a really calculated strategy to maintain power through potential blackmail or intimidation. The fact she saw a recording she couldn't remember participating in just underscores the alleged coercion.
And this control wasn't just limited to these freak-offs or the bedroom, was it?
Not at all. She described constant monitoring, like getting 50 calls if she left the house without telling him exactly where she was going.
Coupled with threats.
Yeah, threats to ruin her career, her life, everything. Total control. She even suspected he took steps to isolate her further.
How so?
She believed he might have told others, people who sometimes supplied her with drugs, to stop dealing with her directly.
Making her completely dependent on him for access.
Exactly. Cutting off any external support,
Yeah.
tightening his grip, increasing her reliance on him for everything. It's a pattern of isolation.
Does she ever try to get help? For the substance issues, for instance?
She did.
Right.
She described going to a luxury rehab facility, trying to disguise it as just a spa visit.
And what happened?
He found out, showed up there, dismissed her problems, called her dramatic.
Oh, no.
And she checked out the next day. She basically said she felt she couldn't get clean, couldn't quit the pills, not with him still in my life.
His interference is just actively harmful, preventing her from getting help.
It shows the extent of the alleged control and maybe a desire to keep her dependent emotionally and physically. Her statement really highlights the power he held over her.
And she testified she wasn't the only woman involved in these freak-offs.
No, she said others were often present. Sometimes escorts, sometimes women she didn't know at all, occasionally even other celebrities.
How did they seem?
They'd arrive via car service, she said. Sometimes they were masked, sometimes they looked distressed, even crying. But she was too afraid to ask questions.
The idea of others potentially being in similar situations, it broadens the scope significantly.
It really does. It suggests a possible pattern and raises serious questions about who these other women were and whether their involvement was also coerced. The fact some seemed upset is very telling.
Did anyone else witness what was happening? Or try to intervene?
She mentioned a former friend, Tiffany Red. Apparently, Tiffany saw some things and told Cassie directly that it wasn't okay, that it wasn't normal.
Did Tiffany speak out?
She did years ago. Wrote an open letter published in Rolling Stone addressing Diddy's behavior. But Cassie testified that Tiffany was then effectively silenced.
Silenced? That's a disturbing claim.
It is. It highlights the power dynamics and the potential consequences for anyone who tried to challenge him or support Cassie.
What about his staff? Were they aware?
Cassie believed they had to have some awareness. Assistants were apparently coordinating arrivals for these events, cleaning up the locations afterward. Maybe not the full picture, but some level of knowledge.
She mentioned an incident with an assistant.
Yeah, an assistant apparently walked in on them during one of these encounters and just casually said, "Sorry, boss," and left.
That suggests a disturbing level of normalization within his close circle, doesn't it?
It certainly could. Like, these kinds of things were just part of the environment, not shocking or unusual to those working closely with him.
How did Cassie herself interpret the purpose behind all this?
Her take was incredibly stark. She said, it wasn't about sex. It was about obedience, submission. He needed to feel untouchable.
Power and control, fundamentally.
That was her interpretation. And when she was asked why others might have stayed silent for so long,
What did she say?
her answer was blunt. Because we thought no one would believe us because he's Diddy.
That immense power and influence creating a shield.
Exactly. A fear of not being believed, purely because of his fame and status. It's a tragic but common reason victims stay silent in these kinds of power imbalances.
So after covering the manipulation, the tunnel, the freak-offs, the testimony then moved into physical abuse.
Yes, she described an escalation. It started, she said, with early signs grabbing her wrist too hard, pushing her during arguments.
Followed by apologies.
Always. Apologies and promises it wouldn't happen again. Promises that were then broken. It's that classic destructive cycle of abuse.
Were there specific incidents she detailed?
Yes, very specific ones. The court was shown a photo of a gash above her eyebrow.
How did she say that happened?
She said it was after she got home late from having dinner by herself. He was allegedly drunk, accused her of cheating. Her memory was hazy, but she remembered waking up to him screaming at her and just intense pain near her eye.
And another incident.
Being kicked in the back. This was apparently after he found a text message on her phone from the musician Kid Cudi, whom she'd briefly dated when she and Diddy were broken up.
Jealousy turning violent.
That's how she described it. Extreme jealousy, using that past connection as a justification for violence. These are incredibly serious allegations.
And even when she tried to leave him, he didn't let go.
No, she testified he'd find ways to punish her even then, sending messages through people she trusted, making her feel like she was always being watched, constantly reminding her who was in control.
And she didn't go to the police.
She explained why. The same reason she gave before. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me. He had power longer. I didn't.
That feeling of powerlessness is such a huge barrier.
It absolutely is. It underlines the challenge of holding powerful people accountable.
And then there was the boat incident she described. Truly shocking.
What did she allege happened there?
She claimed that after a bad night, he physically threw her off a boat into the water in the Caribbean. Called her deadweight.
Threw her off a boat. She had to swim to shore.
That's what she testified. And yet, she still went back to him afterwards. She mentioned that this particular story seemed to visibly affect one of the jurors. I can imagine. The level of fear or control or manipulation needed for someone to return after that, it's hard to comprehend.
It really speaks to the extreme nature of the alleged abuse and the psychological hold he seemingly had over her.
The testimony then focused on one specific event, the Intercontinental Hotel incident. She called this the last straw.
Yes, this apparently happened the night right before her movie premiere. A huge moment for her, something she was proud of and excited about.
That he pressured her.
Into another freak-off, yes.
Yeah.
Claiming it would be quick, help them reconnect. He even framed it as some kind of tradition before big moments.
Using her career achievement against her almost.
It seems that way. Pure manipulation. She said she initially refused, wanted to rest, but eventually gave in, just wanting peace before her big night.
But it wasn't what he promised.
No. She arrived thinking it would be just the two of them, but others were already there. Two other women, a male dancer, candles, cameras set up.
And he gave her something.
A pill, she testified. to loosen up, he allegedly said, even though she was exhausted.
And her memory of the night.
Fragmented. She remembered the dancer wearing a mask, Diddy recording, hearing herself slurring her words, and then blacking out completely.
Blacking out again, the issue of consent with substances is just constantly present.
It really is. The alleged deception about who would be there, combined with giving her a pill, it raises very serious questions about her ability to consent.
How does she wake up?
Alone in the hotel room, she said, covered in sweat. And there was a text message from him.
What did it say?
According to her testimony. "You were amazing. I'm proud." She said she didn't understand what he meant, didn't even ask.
And then she had to go to her premiere.
Yes. She cleaned herself up, hid any marks, put on a smile, and walked the red carpet. Pretended everything was fine.
The disconnect between that public facade and the private reality, it's jarring.
Incredibly. He apparently texted her later, too, asking if she was still glowing and if she wanted to do it again.
Her response.
Silence. She testified, "I never responded."
That silence feels significant.
It really does. She said that night, that whole experience, was the absolute breaking point, the last straw after a decade of alleged control.
It allowed her to see a way out.
For the first time, she said, she could really picture a life without him. So the very next morning, she booked a flight to New York, left him.
And how did that feel?
Like she could finally breathe, she said. After years, that sense of liberation just speaks volumes about what the relationship must have been like.
So the final part of her testimony dealt with the aftermath. Life after leaving.
Yes. She talked about trying to heal, trying to just pretend it hadn't happened, telling people they just grew apart. But inside, feeling broken.
Therapy helped.
It did. She mentioned therapy helped her access repressed memories, remember details, people, places she'd blocked out.
And then the civil lawsuit.
Right, which was filed and then settled very quickly. But she emphasized the settlement money wasn't the point for her.
What was the point?
Validation. Getting a document that said, "I wasn't crazy, it happened." That need to have her reality affirmed after everything. It's powerful. And totally understandable, given the nature of alleged gaslighting and manipulation.
Her lawsuit seemed to open the door for others.
It really seemed to. Other women started coming forward, some anonymously, some filing new complaints, and then, of course, the highly publicized FBI raids on his properties.
What were they reportedly looking for?
Evidence related to allegations of sex trafficking and coercion. The search warrants remain sealed, so we don't know exactly what, if anything, was found. But there were rumors.
Yeah, rumors about finding underground structures, maybe the tunnel she described, extensive files, recording devices. But again, that's unconfirmed speculation at this point.
Still, the fact that federal law enforcement got involved to that degree is significant, and other alleged victims emerging lends weight to Cassie's claims.
Cassie herself, she stayed mostly out of the spotlight since then.
Largely, yes. Declined interviews. She said she doesn't want to be some kind of symbol. She just wants to be free to heal.
But she did choose to testify in this federal trial.
She did. On the record, under oath, recounting everything in detail. And her stated hope for the outcome.
What was it?
Accountability. Not just for her, she said, but for everyone who went through that house. Everyone who might have, in her words, disappeared into those tunnels.
That sense of responsibility again, it's compelling.
Incredibly. Her willingness to speak publicly, despite wanting privacy, really underscores how serious she views these allegations and her commitment to seeking justice, potentially for others too.
And the reaction in the courtroom after her testimony finished.
Reports described complete silence as the judge dismissed the jury. It felt like more than just testimony had happened. It felt like, a veil had been torn back on a hidden world.
Cassie's account really does provide this disturbing, incredibly specific picture of alleged hidden spaces, coercive control. It's far beyond typical celebrity scandal territory.
Absolutely. It gives you this stark, unsettling glimpse into the potential abuse of immense power and the kind of hidden realities that might exist behind facades of fame and success.
And it leaves us, and you listening, with so many unanswered questions, doesn't it?
Definitely. What are the legal consequences going to be? What, if anything, did the FBI actually find? What happens to others who might have been involved as alleged victims or even enablers?
This deep dive into her testimony, it really forces you to think about power dynamics, about vulnerability.
Yeah, and it prompts a final, maybe unsettling thought for you to mull over. What does this specific, detailed account reveal about how hidden, harmful worlds can operate, sometimes right under our noses, even within the sphere of celebrity? There's a sobering look at the potential for exploitation when power goes unchecked.